Hey guys, I am ready to start creating my salt dough. I've got a couple of different ingredients here and a couple things. One, you're gonna need a large mixing bowl, measuring cup, okay, salt, and then obviously flour. This is just the 5-pound bag. You can get the smaller bag if you need, if you don't want to have that much more. The other thing you're gonna need is some water, okay? So what we're going to do is we are going to mix our dry ingredients first, okay? And I need 2 cups, which is about 1 full mixing cup of this, of flour. Two cups of flour. I'll go ahead and throw that all in there. And then we're going to go ahead and put in maybe 1 cup of salt. Okay, so this is going to be quite a bit of salt. This is the one reason why we don't want to let our animal furry friends get too close to it. If they eat this with the salt in it, the salt content is usually, especially too much for little dogs, is going to be too much. The bigger dogs can handle a little bit better, but it's not that big a deal. So, 1 cup, where's the, oh, maybe it's on this side. 1 cup of salt. All right, so I'm going to mix the two together, okay? And then I'm just going to use my hands for mixing. Get this out of the way, okay? And I want to make sure that I mix this all up really good so that they're both really well incorporated to each other, all right? So that we don't have clumps of salt in one place and clumps of flour in another, all right? So I'm just using my hand as a mixer. Doesn't have to be all that pretty. Now, here's the key. Water. Add a little bit at a time. I've got more than the 1 cup that is necessary, which means that I'm not going to use all of this, but I'm going to add just a little bit at a time. Okay? And then I'm going to mix. And it's going to clump up, okay, which is fine. Okay? So if we still have some powder, we're going to go ahead and add a little bit more water. In the beginning, you can add quite a bit, but you don't want to add too much. You can see how it's starting to change, how it's starting to get a little bit more clumpy. All right, but we want to make sure that we go slow enough that we don't get too wet. When we add the water, we also want to make sure that we've got enough in there that it's going to make a paste. Now I've still got some powder in there, so I'm going to add just a little bit more water. I'm not adding a lot of water at a time. Okay, I've still got some powder on the bottom. Okay, you can still see there's some powdered stuff there, so I'm going to add just a little bit more. And it's just a splash at a time. And yes, this will get very sticky on your hand, and yes, it's going to make a mess, which is why we are going to clean up after ourselves when we do this in Mom's kitchen, right? All right. Looks like I might need a little bit more. I'm going to get in here with both hands and try and get it together. This is actually starting to form together and getting pretty good. Now you're going to get to a certain point where you won't need the bowl anymore, where it's actually going to kind of start holding its shape. And this is where it's really important that we make sure that we, see, now this is a little bit on the firm side, so I'm going to add just a little bit more water. Okay, there we go. So I'm just kind of piecing this stuff together, squeezing it, kneading it together, okay? And now, most of this should stick to itself, and it shouldn't stick to the plastic bowl, but just in case, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is what's called wedging. It's also known as kneading, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push down and forward, okay? And I'm just gonna kind of work this stuff in so that all of that dough, all of the flour, all of the salt, all of the water, everything gets mixed together. Now you'll see that I've got a couple little chunks here. As long as I put my dough right over the top of that, I got stuff sticking to my finger, it'll pick that stuff up. You'll also notice, because I'm using a wooden table, okay? You'll notice that there's a little dark area here. This is the moisture of the water that's in the dough getting absorbed by the wood of my table here. So that's something just to kind of keep in mind. If you're on a countertop, usually it's either a stone countertop, Formica, whatever it happens to be, tile. That's usually going to be waterproof, and so the water won't be absorbed into it. This table is usually used for clay, so it's not sealed. All right, so I'm pressing down, and as you'll notice, I kind of turn it about a half a turn, maybe a quarter of a turn every once in a while, but I really want to make sure that I'm really kneading this and mixing this together really well so that I get all of that stuff incorporated, so that there isn't an area that's, say, drier than one area, or one area that has more salt in one area. This is just mixing it all up really, really good. And I'm going to do this for about 2 more minutes, which should be pretty good. Got a little bit left on, and it's a bit of a workout. Okay, you're not gonna be able to do this sitting down. You'll notice that I'm standing up and I'm using it almost kind of like I'm doing CPR. If you've ever been CPR certified, okay, I'm pushing down and using my shoulders more than I'm using just my arm strength. It just makes easier. I'm gonna go back out here a little bit, that way you guys can see. So I'm mixing this together, and that is how we make salt dough. Pretty simple. Now, I want you guys to see how firm this is. I can press my thumb into it, and it's gonna hold its shape, okay? It should not, if you drop it, it should not go and like spread out, okay? It should hold its shape fairly well, and this should be good to go. Now, I don't have any food coloring with me, but if you wanted to, what you could very easily do is just break off a piece, say like so, put a little bit of food coloring in here, and then just complete that process of mixing it how I was showing you, one hand because it's a small piece, but really mix it in really well, and that could change it so that you have red dough and then blue dough, or whatever colors that you want, okay? If you separate the pieces and you want it all back to one, just go ahead and wedge that or mix that in together like we were doing with the kneading process, okay? This is not going to replace clay. It is not the same thing as clay. It is not going to be able to be fired and used to drink out of or anything like that. But at least for our purposes, it'll give us something that's very similar to clay, you know, with the times that we have. So there's my dough. I'm going to go ahead and put this in a Ziploc bag, let it sit for a little bit. Or after I can just put it in my bowl, let it rest for about 20 minutes, and then I'll be ready to get started on building my project.